Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're listening in. This is Sundar Nathan. The topic of conversation today is who is the challenger in B2B selling? Today we'll talk about what a sales cast is. We'll talk about back to the basics in terms of B2B selling after the financial crisis. We'll talk about in search of answers, pattern recognition, and why the challenger is a clear winner in terms of sales rep profiles. We'll go into a study in contrast between the challenger and other rep profiles, and finally, what was learned in the study conducted by the Corporate Executive Board. The agenda for today is what is a sales cast? Initially, we'll describe what this format is. We'll also talk about back to the basics in terms of B2B selling over the last decade, in search of answers to the major challenges that B2B sales managers face, pattern recognition. How do you identify the types of sales reps that you have in your organization today? Why the challenger is a clear winner in terms of sales rep profiles. We'll talk about a study in contrast between the challenger and other rep profiles. And finally, what was learned in the challenger study. So once again, my name is Sundar Nathan. I've done global sales enablement for the last decade, and I've been in the B2B sales, marketing, and consulting space for over 2 decades. And what a sales cast is that it's a series of screencasts and podcasts covering a variety of topics. We'll cover product, sales process, sales tools, win-loss, competitive, best practices within App Annie, as well as the ability for you to watch on your device anytime and anywhere. So what is a sales cast? A sales cast is nothing but a screencast or a podcast covering a variety of topics. We'll go through product information, for example, store intelligence, audience intelligence, usage intelligence. We'll go through the sales process here at App Annie. Also, sales tools that we have available to us. Win-loss and competitive are very important sections that we'll also cover, and best practices. The cool thing about this is you can watch on your device anytime, anywhere. All right, instead of marching you guys through data for the next hour, what I'm going to do is tell you a story instead. Listen, I've been in B2B sales, marketing, consulting, and enablement for over 2 decades, and I've really found that stories work well with salespeople like us. A little walk down memory lane. In 2008-2009, after the fall of Lehman Brothers and the onset of the financial crisis, it was a really, really bad selling environment. Most people in B2B sales that I came into contact with were missing quota by a very wide margin. But I also saw that there were some sales reps in organizations who were still hitting their numbers, and in some cases, blowing their number away, bringing in business that even in the depths of the downturn was business that most salespeople could only dream of in the best of times. So the heads of sales that I came into contact with were basically saying, hey, help us solve this mystery. What is it that these folks are doing that's different from what the average performers do? Help me bottle it. Help me export it to everyone else. A rising tide lifts all boats. I'll keep my job, we'll keep our jobs, our company will stay afloat, and good things will happen. We'll survive the storm. So really around that same time, Brent Adamson and Matthew Dixon launched the Challenger Study. This is what went on to become the book, The Challenger Sale. They went out to organizations around the world and started with about 1,000 salespeople. It has since expanded to about 35,000 around the world, across industries, across geographies. But the thing they learned, the thing that came out of this is 2 fascinating finds. The first was that statistically, when they looked at salespeople, the reps could all be placed into one of 5 different selling profiles or selling approaches. They came to call these 5 profiles of sales reps specific names, and I'm going to tell you what those are in a few minutes. The second big finding was that one of those profiles performs dramatically better than the rest. And one of those profiles comes in dead last. Here's the kicker. The one that comes in dead last happened to be the one that most heads of sales, left to their own devices, would have really bet the farm on. This is the profile that actually informed their recruiting, their development efforts, the culture, and the climate that they were trying to build in their sales organization for many years. And sales leaders came back after looking at the results of the survey and reading the book, and they basically said, wow, I'm placing my bets on a horse that's least likely to win the race. I've got to fix this. Tell me more about how to right the ship, how to get on the right path, because I need help right now. We all know that gone are the days when a high-performing salesperson in B2B was, as Neil Rackham would say, and by the way, Neil Rackham is the guy that wrote Spin Selling back in the day. And he would call these people the talking parrot. You know, somebody who looks really polished, carries the bag nicely, can memorize the company script, can tell the story, can show up and throw up effectively about, who we are, what we do, our mission, our values, our products, and all the features and benefits of the XP10000 product. And then ask that if that sounds interesting. In our case, that would be product demos and product information about audience intelligence, usage intelligence, etc. Gone are those days because the customer is out learning all that stuff on their own. They're out assessing their own needs. They're out shortlisting suppliers on their own. And they actually put all that information on the internet. They use third-party purchasing consultants. Procurement has gone from a backwater in a lot of companies where it was decades ago to a very sophisticated function with sophisticated analytics and tools that they bring in to assess different vendors. So by the time the average customer contacts a supplier, they're pretty far down the purchase journey. In fact, it's nearly 60% according to the data. Now, this is a bit of a data point that we've heard consistently in B2B. The trouble here, as you can imagine for a salesperson, is, boy, that really stinks. Because if the customer's already gone out there on their own, and all the things I was taught to do in training, to assess needs, to go in and tell people about the features and benefits of our solution, I was taught to come in and demonstrate how we're better than the competition in my demos. And what you're saying now is the customer's already done all that on their own. But that's where the customer is, where they've gone and done their learning on their own about what their problems are, about who can help them solve those problems, and about what pricing looks like. And their mind really shifts from who can help me do this to who's going to do this for the least amount of money possible. So if this is why nobody wants to buy from you, what do customers really want? In fact, in a world where your biggest competitor is actually not your competitor at all, but your customer's ability to go out and learn on their own, that the thing they want that they couldn't learn on their own is the thing that they missed. That's what they're looking for. I think more often than not, what we're doing as B2B salespeople is one of two things. And I've heard this from customers over and over and over again. These two things drive customers crazy. Anybody want to guess what these are? Well, one is when we walk in and we do the show up and the throw up sales technique. We come in and we talk about the company, the history, the mission, our values, the features and benefits of our solution. And then we save a little bit of time at the end to ask the customer if that sounds interesting. We know that's not valuable. The customers tell us it's not valuable because it's not actually about them at all. It's all about you as a software or hardware or networking or market data provider. We know that's not valuable. The customers tell us it's not valuable because it's not actually about the customer at all. It's all about us as App Annie, as a market data provider. So that's one type of scenario that drives the customer crazy. And to be fair, I think most people in sales and professional sales are trying to get away from that. We've been trying to get away from that for a long time. But we ended up going to a place that's actually equally troubling. When I ask customers, they tell us, one is the show up and throw up technique that really drives us in the opposite direction. The other one is the open-ended questioning sales technique. And that was a big surprise for us. Because what I learned over the years with solution selling or customer-centric selling was to ask a lot of open-ended questions and to get the prospect talking about their business needs. And really what customers, for example, my own customers in the past, like Zora, Lithium, Zetata, Simplicant, Microsoft, VMware, HP, Oracle, have told me in the past 5 years is pretty eye-opening. It is eye-opening because we've been teaching salespeople to do this for years. And companies have spent millions, if not billions, all over our industry as a sales training and enablement approach to teach salespeople to ask better questions, to go in and ask great questions, open-ended questions that allow the customer to say things, off which we can customize our solution, attach our value proposition and our value solution to exactly what comes out of the customer's mouth. But really what customers told us is, look, I understand why salespeople ask questions. I get it. We're not going to do business with you unless you understand my business, and you've got to customize that solution to fit my needs. Listen, I get that. But don't start there. Don't walk in and ask me what's keeping me up at night. Instead, let's start the conversation with what should be keeping me up at night. Why didn't you tell me something I don't know? Tell me the thing I missed. Bring new insight to the table. And this is something that we can really effectively do at App Annie. And customers understand. They understand why salespeople do it. It's the old Stephen Covey principle. You know, the guy who wrote The 7 Laws of Highly Effective People. And they say, look, I appreciate it. It's empathetic. You as a salesperson come in. You want to understand before being understood. You ask me lots of questions about me, what keeps me up at night, what's going to get me fired or promoted this year, what my KPIs are, what the CEO cares about, how does it tie to my MBOs this year, what's my strategy, how does that translate down to my department, my function, my team. I get it, I understand it, but that's not how I want to start the sales conversation. Teach me something of value. Bring an insight to the table. Then I'll answer your questions all day long. And by the way, not for nothing, customers will also tell you, look, the thing that really keeps me up at night is the thought of the next salesperson coming into my office asking me what keeps me up at night, because I spend all day long, all week, answering that question for salespeople, educating them about things that they should already know. What I want them to do is to educate me about the thing that I don't know. So for example, I spoke to a friend of mine who's a CIO at a large company. He spends a lot on technology, and what he told me was pretty interesting. When a salesperson comes to my office and asks these questions, what we fail to appreciate is that the salesperson will meet with more CIOs in a week than I will meet with in a year, maybe in 2 years. So again, what I want for them, not to ask me what keeps me up at night, tell me what's keeping those other people up at night. What are they working on? So I want to know what my peer CIOs are working on and what they're challenged by. That's your value that you can add to me, not by asking me questions about what my KPIs are. I expect you to know that already. I want the salesperson to come in and tell me who their most innovative customers are, their most progressive customers. What are they doing with their products and solutions that I should be doing? I need them to tell me what the risk is that's going to blindside me. What's going to get me fired that I don't know about right now? Show me what I missed. Despite all the learning I can do on my own, I need you to show me what I missed. And so the questions that come out of this are, from our perspective, is what kind of salespeople do that at App Annie? What kind of content do we need to put in their hands? What kind of playbook do we need to run with the customer? So let's cover the salesperson piece of it first. We're going to get the cliff notes of the how-to manual. How do you recruit challengers? What's the key to developing folks around these challenger competencies? And how do I build a climate that's supported, that actually allows people to exhibit those challenger behaviors? And let's start with who challengers are. There was a study back in 2009, the Challenger Study. It's been run globally now for 6 years with 35,000 people. But the core of this was that a survey went out and ran with sales managers. They actually asked sales managers to assess the people on their teams on a scale of 1 to 7 on a range of attributes. It was just a sample list here, but they went out and asked sales managers, hey, compare Bob against Sue on Bob's willingness to risk disapproval, his goal motivation, his attachment to our company, his intellectual curiosity. Does he have a good level of business acumen? Is he good at customer needs assessment? How about negotiation? How about solution selling or teamwork? Does he follow the sales process? How good is he at doing his homework before he goes out on a sales call or gets on the phone? Is he good at filling out his expense reports on time? And then knowledge. How much does he know about what we create, what we sell, and to whom we sell here at App Annie? And the study really tried to focus on, if you look at it and you kind of squint at it, is things that are not really personality driven. Think about whether these things are a personality, whether you're born with it or if we can be taught. One of the things you won't see on the next page, for example, is goal orientation. I would have thought that surely high performance in sales is described by a great sense of goal motivation. But it turns out that goal motivation is really kind of a core curriculum to being a salesperson. So sales organizations are now using a wide range of approaches to really equip reps for changing customer behavior. Here at App Annie, we're really thinking about how to use a wide range of approaches to equip you for changing customer behavior. And in response to changing customer behavior, sales organizations are going back to basics. They really are trying to focus sales reps on traditional approaches to sales effectiveness. Think about it. This is about better communicating the value proposition, building business acumen, building rep confidence by reinforcing the sales process, strengthening customer relationships, and also sales reps increasing their own efforts. So here at App Annie, that would be better communication of our value proposition, about building our own business acumen, about understanding the industries that we sell into, about building your confidence, also reinforcing the sales process that we use. And it's also about strengthening customer relationships, and you increasing your efforts. So sales managers were really surveyed to determine the skill of sales reps worldwide. And each manager assessed 1 star rep and 2 core sales reps across a set of 44 attributes. You see some of them now. For example, willingness to seek approval, how they used internal resources, the level of preparation, their ability to generate leads on their own, the level of curiosity. This is really important here at App Annie. Also, goal motivation, negotiation skills, industry knowledge, product knowledge, very important. So 683 sales reps from across 22 companies were surveyed. And basically, managers were assessed on whether the sales reps are more or less likely to exhibit certain sales-related attitudes, skills, behaviors, knowledge, etc. The important thing to remember is that skills don't operate independently but in combination. So we've got to study the skills based on how we group together in certain sales reps. And based on this research, sales reps fall into 5 distinct profiles. And the profiles are actually based on something called factor analysis to identify common groups of behaviors or skills. So the 5 sales profiles are the hard worker, the challenger, the relationship builder, the lone wolf, and the problem solver. The first one you've got is the hard worker. Now, the hard worker, for lack of a better description, works hard. These are the nose to the grindstone sellers. I think we all know these folks, right? They get in early, they stay late, they place more phone calls, they knock on more customer doors than anybody in the organization. They're always open and eager for feedback. In fact, they're actually a pleasure to manage from that perspective. And after they do a joint visit or call with their manager, before the manager offers any feedback, the hard worker will say, hey, what could I have done differently? How can I get a little bit better? Very, very eager, right? They treat sales as sort of a numbers game. It's a volume game. Activities in, visits in equals business out. And if I just manage the numbers, manage the throughput, I should hit my number. Okay, then we've got the challenger. Again, hack surprise when I tell you the challenger wins, but the challenger is really the debater on the team. They've got a unique and provocative point of view, and they're not afraid to use that point of view to push people outside their comfort zone a little bit. In fact, I'll tell you, a head of sales that I spoke to last year, and I walked him through the data, especially from the book, he hadn't seen it before. And after I told him that the challenger wins, he says, that's a real bummer because I fired all those guys 5 years ago. Because they don't fit, right? They're a pain in the ass. They always want more time on my calendar to tell me how the comp plan should have been organized so they could have made much more money. And you know what our strategy should be, why this other product leader should get fired, and all this other stuff. They're very, very opinionated people. The third one is relationship builders. Now, they're the classic sales profile. Now, we're not really talking about, sort of glad-handing, backslapping salesperson. What we're really talking about here are people who build strong customer advocates, who build champions of the client because they're very, very responsive, very reactive, and they acquiesce. They agree to what the customer asks for. If the customer asks for a discount, the relationship builder is not going to cave right away, but they'll go and lobby on that customer's behalf with their own finance organization. They'll say, we need to do this because it's right for the customer. They're thinking, let me see if I can flex a little bit on our pricing, on our side to help the customer out. They'll say, the customer wants us to customize our solution or our implementation. Even if it means eating into the deal profitability, well, the relationship builder is the customer's advocate inside our organization. They'll go out to their boss, they go out to finance, they go to the product. They say, here's why we need to do this for the customer. They're going to advocate for the customer inside their own company. As a result, they get along with people. They're very generous with their time. They're very open and acquiescent to what the customer wants. All right, the fourth one is the lone wolf. Now, lone wolves are sort of the prima donnas of the sales organization. They don't usually follow the sales process. They don't file their expense reports on time. They're usually in their CFO's office asking for an exception. They build their own marketing materials. They drive marketers crazy. They sell things that you don't even make, and then they ask for forgiveness afterwards. And here's the thing. Beware of the silent song of the lone wolf. Because what you'll find is that lone wolves actually do pretty well. But a lone wolf is a dangerous posture upon which to scale your organization, to scale your approach to selling. The reality for lone wolves is in every company in the world, and Challenger ran this analysis for some of the biggest companies, We could go in and ask who's on the Mount Rushmore of professional selling organizations, and those companies have about 20 to 25% of their sales force who fall into the lone wolf category. But there are some exceptions. For example, pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, financial services companies don't have a lot of lone wolves. Because when you break the rules, somebody gets fired or somebody dies. But in our business, in the startup world, you might see a ton of these folks. In most companies, there's kind of an allowance for people to break the rules, at least bend the rules. And there's a little bit of selection bias here too. So when I tell you when you see the results, be skeptical about the performance of the lone wolf for two reasons. One, because of the selection bias. If they weren't hitting their goals, they would have been fired already. So you will see lone wolves hitting their goals and somehow figuring out a way to survive and thrive in organizations, even though they break all the rules. When somebody's missing their goals, that's when we go and ask them, were you using the sales process? Were you using the tools and methodology that we've actually taught you in training? Are you doing what your manager has told you to do? Are you using the marketing collateral we built for you? When the answer is no, then you'd better get in line or we're going to show you the door. And so most of the bad lone wolves get fired. So that's the selection bias. And the other thing is, even if they did do well, what does that mean for the head of sales? I've seen a few companies where I found there are a lot of lone wolves in the high performer category, and it's really a bummer because they really pocket vetoes everything that you've invested in, your sales process, your methodology, your tools, your CRM system, you name it. They figured out the best way to sell for this company is to ignore everything the company tells you. So that's a bummer because you can't scale that. How do you teach a new person how to follow that kind of process of selling? So be really skeptical around the lone wolf when we get there. And finally, number 5, we have the problem solver. The problem solver actually reliably responds to both internal and external stakeholders. They're the ones that are on email all the time. They try to make sure that all the problems are solved. The problem solver, or the reactive problem solver, and really all salespeople are kind of in the business of solving customer problems, but the difference here is the reactive nature with which these people do it. They're more like customer service reps in sales reps' clothing. As one sales manager at a startup recently told me, look, I understand why customers love these guys. Promises get made across a sale. And when a solution has to be implemented, we all know that those promises sometimes fall apart when it comes to implementation time. You can really count on hurdles that you didn't foresee. But the problem is that these folks are unwilling to hand it off to the professional services group or the customer success group. The customers got them on speed dial, and the problem solver will take the customer's phone call, and they want to make sure that all those promises that they made during the sales cycle are actually kept. Now, that's a great posture, right? Because customers love it. From a customer's perspective, they love problem solvers. But from a sales manager's perspective, we wish that they'd really focus on getting that next deal through the pipeline. So again, think of the 5 profiles, and as I've told you, it's kind of academically interesting to think of your sales organization across the landscape of these 5 profiles. Where are the peaks and the valleys in your own sales team, in your sales organization? Okay, now that we know the 5 rep profiles, the more interesting thing is to find out how they perform relative to one another. Let's take a look at that. What you're looking at here on this slide is the distribution of performance across the 5 profiles, and it's cut 2 different ways. In the light blue bars, you're seeing the distribution of what we call the core performing salespeople. This is the middle 60% of the distribution curve. The hump is in the middle of the normal curve, the core of the sales organization, the average performer universe. That's what you see in the light blue bars. In the dark blue bars, this is the distribution of the high performers, the stars, the top 20% of the sales organization. So the first thing for the head of sales, the biggest point of leverage, is moving the poor or getting the poor sales performer to replicate some of the behavior of the stars. They're almost there, but if we can get them to tweak their selling approach to X, to Y, to Z, we can really generate some significant performance lift for the organization. And that's what heads of sales want to know, and that's what we're looking at here. The second thing you'll notice is that if you look at those average performance for a minute, there's not a whole lot of story here, right? There's a little spike in the relationship builder, but that's pretty good representation across all 5. The bigger surprise is when we look at the high performers, and this is really the crux of the Challenger study. When you look at the top 20% of salespeople, the story is very, very different. Here, there's clearly one dominant way to be a star, and that is to be a challenger. Now, it's not 100%, right? It's not a silver bullet. There are other ways to be a challenger. But if you were a betting person, and you put your money on a challenger as being highly likely to be a high performer, you're going to win. And this is what is stunning here. It cuts to the fabric, to the core of what most salespeople grew up believing about sales. People sell to people. What you're telling me here is that people who do that best, the people who do what the customer wants, who find those customers, who hug those customers, who build the most moat around those customers so that the competition can encroach, that they actually have the lowest probability of being a high performer. That's the relationship builder. Well, that's a bummer because those are the people I recruit. Those are the behaviors I incentivize. That's what I reward in my organization. Those are the stories that we usually celebrate. That's woven into the sales culture of our sales organization. To be exactly that kind of person who you're telling me has the lowest chance of being a high performer. What's up with that? How do we explain that? And it really raises big questions. First, what is the role of the relationship in today's B2B sales environment? Does a relationship matter? What I'll tell you is that relationships absolutely matter. But in fact, the currency of the relationship has changed dramatically. So let's pick this apart a little bit and look at the key differences between challengers and relationship builders, looking at the two extremes here. You've got challengers on the left at 39% of high performers and relationship builders on the right at 7%. Now, all these profiles are roughly equal in occurrence in the total sales population, but challengers and lone wolves are much more likely to be high performers than the core performers. See, lone wolves can be successful if the environment really matches their natural style, but regardless of success, they pose a significant management challenge, and you can't scale a company's sales organization based on lone wolves. Hard workers and problem solvers are much more likely to be core performers than high performers, and the relationship builder is much more likely to be a core performer than a high performer in today's marketplace. Relationship builders are really focused on resolving tension and creating a more collaborative agreement environment. But challengers succeed because challengers create constructive tension with a customer. What's different about the challenger is his or her ability to teach the customer unique insight that are tailored to the customer's unique value drivers. And they do this in a very assertive, authoritarian way. The challenger also excels in other areas such as product and industry knowledge. So what are the 6 unique attributes of the challenger? They offer a unique perspective, number 1. Number 2, they have excellent two-way communication skills. They actually have a high degree of attunement to customers' content and emotions. 3, they know that the customers have specific value drivers and they know those value drivers really well. 4, they can identify economic drivers to close the deal. 5, they're very comfortable discussing money. 6, they can pressure the customer in a win-win way. So let's pick this apart a little bit and look at the key differences between challengers and relationship builders. So looking at two extremes, you've got challengers on the left at 39% of high performers, relationship builders on the right at 7%. All right, what was learned? So the challengers here, you see all the variables that factor together to describe these two profiles. It's basically a story wrapper around the data. Challengers do 3 things that we think are really different from the average salesperson. They teach, they tailor, and they take control. Let me explain by what I mean by each of those. The first one is that they teach. So the challenger shows up with a unique point of view, as I mentioned before. They show up with a new idea for the customer to save money, to make money, or to avoid risk, or even grab market share. The challengers provide the customer with an idea that the customer themselves hadn't fully thought of or appreciated. It's a thing that the customer themselves had missed. So if we went all the way back, if all that you knew that what customers were looking for the thing that they missed, if they're looking to buy is actually new ideas, new insight, and I told you that of the 5 profiles, challengers are the ones that do that, you would actually hypothesize that they would win and you'd be right. But more importantly, that's not all they do, and the story doesn't stop there. The second piece, and this is something I've always personally strived to do all through my career, is that we need to deeply appreciate the role that this piece has played in today's selling environment. And it's not just that you teach, but that you tailor the message for the person sitting across the table. Because as we know, in the world of selling or buying, this is gone. Because as we know, the world of selling or buying has gone from a single decision maker to larger groups, especially as the sticker price of the solution goes up. It's a consensus buying environment today, and challengers really understand that. So if they can take an insight, even if it's a singular insight, to make it resonate with the analyst in the marketing department of a retail e-commerce company, an associate in a hedge fund, a CIO, a head of IT infrastructure, the head of security, a database administrator, the head of HR, procurement, finance, legal, all up and down the food chain, then it's really powerful. So what they're able to say is, hey, I've got an insight, and it resonates one way with the analyst and another way with the CMO. It resonates one way with the database engineer and one way with the CIO. The challenger can actually tell that story in a way that it really ties to what that person is paid on, what their KPIs are, what matters to them at their level, to make it really resonate at that deep level. And they can amazingly do this across companies, across climates, across cultures that they encounter in the sales environment. They do it across geographic cultures. And they can do this across companies. They can do it across market climates, across cultures that they encounter out in the sales environment, and across geographies. They're really good at taking that message and making it resonate. The last piece is that challengers take control. The key to success for the challenger profile is the ability to teach, to tailor, and to assert control. Teaching is reframing the way that the customer views their business and their needs. Tailoring is linking our capabilities to the customer's individual goals to overcome the specific barriers to purchase. And asserting control is actually openly pursuing the goals in a direct but not too aggressive way to overcome risk aversion in today's market. So the 3 questions that we as sales managers need to ask: what do my reps teach? How do I get my reps to tailor? And how do I get my reps to assert control? Now, I'll tell you, this is the one, and I've been telling this story for a while now, and this is the one we get the most confusion about. And I think about if there were just a bunch of people in the room who'd never heard the word challenger before around sales, and if I went in and told you, hey, I'm here to tell you about how to be a challenger salesperson, and I asked you to shout out what's the first image that comes to mind, I think what I'd hear back are things like aggressive, obnoxious, pushy, rude, bull in a china shop, like Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross. Where are the good leads? Always be closing. The used car salesman image of sales, a sort of antiquated, really pushy image of the salesperson. But that's not what we're talking about at all. In fact, if these people were just pushy and obnoxious and aggressive, we'll call them jerks, not challengers. And that's actually not the story. What they do is quite a bit different. Taking control is quite a bit different. Taking control is a professional, empathetic, and respectful posture. It's about holding your ground. Think about a spectrum of postures that a salesperson can take with a customer. On the one hand, you've got passive posture, and passive posture is basically whatever the customer wants. Think about a spectrum of postures that a salesperson can take with a customer. On the one hand, you've got passive posture, and really passive posture is whatever the customer wants, whatever they want you to do, whether it's a discount, it's customization. You think it's all about what the customer wants and about me taking care of that for them. That's a passive posture. On the other end of the continuum is an aggressive posture. And that's all about what I want. And I don't really give a rip about what the customer wants. 2 extremes. Being assertive is right in the middle. It's about holding your ground. It's not about being aggressive or obnoxious. And typically, on the passive side, you'll see it's a significant sales performance problem, right? They're trying to resolve conflict and get along with the customer. And that's a big issue. On the other hand, the aggressive posture is a sales leadership nightmare. If you tell sales to be aggressive, they may become too aggressive. Some drivers of passive behavior, if you think about it, is reps think that they want the sale more than the customer wants the sale, and therefore the customer dictates the terms. The second one is erosion of control. Usually assertive people become passive due to perceived lack of control over the outcome of the sale. And the third one is a relationship focus. Basically, they sit on the customer side of the table and advocate for the customer needs. All right, to summarize, the challenger always has a different view of the world. They understand the customer's business. They love to debate. They push the customer. They offer a unique perspective. They have excellent 2-way communication skills. They really have a high degree of attunement to a customer's content as well as emotions. They know the customer's value drivers really, really well. They can identify economic drivers to close the deal in alignment with the customer's value drivers. They're very comfortable discussing money, and they can pressure the customer in a win-win way. Thank you for listening. This has been a sales cast covering who is a challenger in B2B selling. And in the next sales cast, we'll dive into a framework for hiring challengers, what competencies we need to look for, what the definition of those competencies are, some sample interview questions for each competency. We'll look at some evaluation guidelines and red flags to look for during the interview process. Good luck, This is Sundar Nathan. Happy selling.